Years ago, I did a rant. I did a video where I shared my frustrations when it comes to Disney's acquisition of the company 20th Century Fox, specifically their rebranding of the studio by taking the Fox out of the studio's name. I also mentioned my thoughts and worries about what they would do with the Marvel properties that they got the rights to after buying Fox, like X-Men and Fantastic Four. And after seeing the recent announcement of the next slate of films in the MCU to come out next year, those worries were not only just solidified, they were completely emblazoned and put in neon lights. Because Disney has now rebranded the X-Men. Taking the Fox out of 20th Century Fox, okay, that wasn't enough. And at the same time, I guess you could kind of look at the argument, oh, well, we don't want people to be confused with the other Fox. But at the same time, I still think that's kind of dumb. But at least that argument kind of makes somewhat sense when you think about it. Rebranding the X-Men to the Mutants makes no fucking sense whatsoever. And it's a spit in the face to fans of the franchise. It's a fucking joke. And the only reason why this rebranding happened is because of political correctness. And now, before anybody corrects me on this, I will admit that, yes, Stan Lee at one point thought about calling the comic series The Mutants. But he decided against it because he thought it was too deep of a term or a title for a comic book series and was a little vague, and he thought that people might not respond to it as well. So he went with the term X-Men because it sounded better. It had a more unique sound to it. And it just rolled off the tongue in a way that the Mutants didn't. And the rest is history. And for decades, upon decades, nobody said anything about the name X-Men. Nobody said that the term was offensive. Nobody said that it was outdated. Until a high-ranking executive in Marvel, Victoria Alonso, said something in a interview or some sort of press junket a few years ago, where she said a statement along the lines of this: that name is outdated. What about the X-women or the X-children? And apparently her issues with the name X-Men was shared with other people in Marvel. So much so to the point where it clearly created a groundswell, created a bunch of people who were high-ranking in Marvel currently, who decided it's time. It's time to take the X-Men out of the X-Men and just call it the Mutants. Because X-Men is offensive. Because the name X-Men is not politically correct. That would be like rebranding Street Fighter, the video game franchise, as the Street, because Fighter is too offensive because it promotes violence. And changing the whole video game franchise into a series where you're not even fighting in a tournament anymore, you're just there on the streets, helping people out, helping the cops, doing whatever to help people stop crime, but doing it in a non-violent way. Maybe use a taser or two. Maybe, do some stuff with maybe a club, but nothing too brutal. No finishers, none of that stuff. And no fighting in a tournament, because that's too offensive and that's too outdated. And we'll just make it the Street Fighter equivalent of fucking Sesame Street. Does that make sense to you? No. It's fucking stupid. And I'm not saying that Marvel is going to turn X-Men into Sesame Street. That's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying that rebranding X-Men as something completely different for the sole reason of it being politically correct is one of the most asinine and stupid things I've seen a major company or studio do in a long fucking time. This is something that should be ridiculed. This is something that should be completely fucking lambasted. Nobody should be giving this a pass. And hopefully the backlash from this will cause Marvel to change their mind and nix this stupid idea before things get any worse. But I doubt they will. Also, before anyone goes after me with their Wolverine claws, I want to point out the fact that this could all be rumors. This might not be true. Disney could backtrack and change things and not go into this direction. Things that I'm hearing about Miss Marvel could be complete and total bullshit. But the thing is, there is no previous precedent in the MCU for rebranding a franchise like this. They had not done this at all prior to the Mutants. So it definitely does seem like there's something more to this than them just calling it the Mutants because it's a little prequel to lead up to X-Men. Because as I was saying, there is no incident, there is no precedent. There's no instance of this being the case for any other franchise in the MCU. Now you're going to get people confused. They're like, what? Does this have something to do with the New Mutants? Oh no, it doesn't. It's the X-Men in the MCU. I've heard people say, oh, well, that's just a prequel. The next film will be called the X-Men. That's fucking stupid. Even if that is the logic behind things, that's absolutely idiotic. There's no reason for this. There's no reason to have the new X-Men film in the MCU or the first entry be called the Mutants. Also, this is incredibly tone deaf, considering the history of the term in the X-Men comics. Because the Mutants, in terms of like the term mutant, was used in a derogatory way. In a lot of ways, it was the equivalent of a racial slur. But now we're going to call the whole team the Mutants. How progressive of you, Disney. How progressive of you, MCU. I know some people, oh, it's just a title. It's not just a title. It's changing things for no reason and just rebranding a iconic franchise because the name offends you. To me, this is something that should be unacceptable. You should not be allowed to change things in this fashion because it's unlike some other things that have been rebranded in sports and in other media. The term X-Men itself is not fucking offensive. There's nothing offensive about it. Unless you're trying to use it as some sort of thing where people are using it as a derogatory term for trans people. But that's not what the X-Men franchise has ever been about. X-Men for years has been one of the most progressive and strong comic book series when it comes to having voices for other people of different races, of different genders, of different creeds and sexualities. They have always been at the forefront of those moments in comics, and people have embraced them, even with the title X-Men. And also, if you think about it, X-Men, if you have a team called that features all these different people that are of different genders, different sexualities and races and so on, doesn't that really make it an example of equality? That you can have a team called the X-Men, but it would still have equality it wouldn't just be men who were part of the team? I would think that that would represent equality, which is something that a lot of these people who are high up in Marvel, who are making a lot of these decisions, would, I think, believe in. But I guess not, because it's outdated. It's offensive. It offends me, so it needs to be rebranded and erased. And if it doesn't stop there, folks, because Miss Marvel, who in the comics was initially created as a soundboard for certain writers in the Marvel office's identity politics, is now a mutant as well. Even though she wasn't a mutant in the comics, she was never a member of the X-Men. But now, she's a mutant. Because in the TV series, it's revealed that she's a mutant. And since Marvel is all about tying their TV shows and their streaming series into their cinematic universe right now, Miss Marvel is going to be a member of the Mutants. She's probably going to be one of the founding members of that team. And that's rewriting history. That's rewriting things in a way that I just can't wrap my head around. Especially when it comes to how badly Fox previously botched X-Men. Now they're going to botch X-Men in a completely different fashion by just doing their own fucking thing and ignoring a lot of the franchise's legacy. And as a fan of X-Men, as somebody who has been a fan of the comics since I was a kid, who grew up watching the X-Men 90s cartoon series on Fox Kids, and has always been a fan of this property, it's unbelievably infuriating to see Marvel do this. Especially when it comes to the fact that X-Men, as a film series, has yet to live up to its full potential. Because the comics have so many phenomenal, great story arcs. They had 2 chances to do Dark Phoenix, and they fucked them both up. And you could do a better job this time, possibly. You could make the best possible X-Men movie based on the comics and what is already there. But judging by what I'm seeing here, it looks like they're not going to take things in that direction. And if that does wind up being the case, that's just a fucking shame. And that'll just be one example of what I would like to call the XMCU. Because if the MCU thinks this is a good idea, if they think that this is acceptable, if they continue to do this kind of stuff, they won't be around forever like some of their fans think. They won't be lasting till the end of time. They won't even make it to phase 6. Like they think they're destined and just guaranteed to do, because they've already set up phases 4, 5, and 6 at this point. Or even further than that. Because I remember reading something where Kevin Feige was like, or Feige was like, oh yeah, or was it Feige? I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I don't fucking care either, to be perfectly honest, considering what he's been doing as of late, and just being what seems like a yes man for all these other people that are seemingly making all these decisions. I mean, I guarantee that Alonso has a pretty big pull in Marvel right now. Look at a lot of the different decisions that have been made with the Multiverse of Madness, with other shows, with what's going on with the Mutants. It ties into her statements where she said she doesn't like the name because she thinks it's offensive, or it ties into the way that X-Men comics have been written lately, which is a bunch of cringy identity politics bullshit. So, yeah, I would not be surprised at all if Kevin doesn't have as much power like he used to. He's just going along for the ride and other people have him by the balls. But going back to what I was saying, he said something about they had a plan set up for the next 10 years. You keep this shit up, you won't last 10 years. And that's a goddamn guarantee. You will not last 10 years. You keep this shit up and think that this is acceptable. I mean, what's next? They're going to rebrand Deadpool as Pool? Because Dead is too offensive. Can't call him Deadpool. Because that promotes not only violence, but murder. So he's just called Pool. God damn it. I hate this. I just want the X-Men to have a film series that's as good as the comics. Or as good as the animated show. I want that. The best and the closest I've ever seen that with the X-Men franchise is with X2. And that's it. The X-Men film franchise for me is one of the most disappointing franchises out there. Well, Days of Future Past was also close as well. So you have X2 and Days of Future Past, and then the first X-Men was there. An okay starting point, but not really anything that strong or that particularly memorable. X3 was enjoyable at parts, but a massive fuck up in other parts when it comes to how it handled the Dark Phoenix storyline. First Class, I thought was garbage. I don't understand the praise for that one, but to each their own. Days of Future Past surprised me, and I liked it quite a bit. And then Apocalypse was ass. And I haven't seen Dark Phoenix yet, but I've seen clips, and I know that they didn't do it right. They didn't do the storyline justice again. And I haven't seen the New Mutants yet, but I'm pretty sure that's going to suck too. So yeah, the X-Men have been in dire need of a good, worthy adaptation of their excellent comic storylines. And there are so many great characters from that franchise. And if Marvel thinks that just making Miss Marvel a random X-Men, one of the founding members of the team, is gonna fly, if they think that they can just rebrand X-Men and call it the Mutants, and fans are just gonna think that that's okay, they got another fucking thing coming. Because I guarantee a bunch of X-Men fans, when they saw this shit, they were like, what the fuck is this? You gotta be fucking kidding me. The Mutants? What's wrong with just calling them X-Men? What's wrong with X-Men? Oh, everything is wrong with X-Men. Because it's offensive. It's not politically correct. And people wondered why I was not cheering and just celebrating in the streets when Disney and Marvel got the rights to Fox. This shit is why. This is exactly why I did not want them to have these rights. Because I saw the writing on the wall. I saw them trying to do this fucking shit. Because if you look at what they've been trying to do as of late, in the comics in particular, I knew that this was a possibility. That they were going to try to pull this crap. Try to rebrand the X-Men. And force even more identity politics and other stuff into the franchise than ever before. So buckle up, folks. It's just going to get bumpier from here. If this is the vision and the path that the MCU and Disney has decided to choose when it comes to the X-Men franchise. This whole video was just me venting and ranting and just getting some things off my chest. And I am absolutely hoping, against all hope, that everything that I talked about in this video does not come to be. I don't want to be right. Just like I said numerous times in this video, I don't want to be right about this. I would rather be wrong, because I want a good quality X-Men film again. That's really the ultimate goal that I want when it comes to more X-Men films being made. An X-Men film that's on par with some of the excellent writing and storytelling from the comics. But when John Byrne can't even get any work in the industry anymore, and he has to make his own fan fiction X-Men comics, well, that's not a very good sign of things going forward. But we shall see what happens. We'll see what the future holds. But it doesn't look promising to me. It really does not. It doesn't look good.